Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of the Rethinking Resources podcast, brought to you by OMV.
We're your hosts, Julie McCarthy.
And I'm Steve Shade.
Steve and I are two independent radio journalists taking you inside the biggest challenges we're facing in the climate change transformation.
Our topic this first season is the circular economy, a hugely exciting concept, full of promise and full of challenges.
The circular economy aims to close the loop by using and reusing resources more efficiently and eliminating waste. New solutions are being created and pioneered to radically alter production processes, eliminate waste, increase efficiencies, and reach climate goals.
In this episode, we will be telling you about so-called sustainable plastics that are produced from renewable or circular feedstocks. Until recently, the plastics industry has relied upon fossil fuels like oil and gas as their primary feedstocks, but this is now changing.
To produce sustainable plastics, renewable feedstock and recycled plastic waste are the main alternative sustainable sources that industry is now using and continues to develop.
And the technology is moving fast. Carbon monoxide and even carbon dioxide, the evil villain of climate change, are being explored as new alternatives. So this is a tremendously exciting space on the cutting edge of technology.
To tell us about the promise and potential of sustainable plastics, we're joined today by Stephan Roest, Strategic Platform Leader for Circular Economy Solutions at Borealis. Stephan, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Julie and Steve.
So Stephan, let's begin with the big why behind the push to develop sustainable plastics. There is, of course, a tremendous amount of excitement in this space, so please tell us about the why behind it all.
Yes, so plastics are basically all around us. You see them in shop, in house, but they have literally become the victim of its own success. It's so superior in properties, for example, mechanical properties in being lightweight, but also giving strength, or barrier properties to preserve our food. And at the same time, we really manage to scale up production to have it low cost. So it's also much cheaper than alternative materials. However, we failed to, or we did not succeed in do a proper collection and recycling of plastic. That is now resulting in a lot of plastic waste in our environment. So what we need to do is rethink the way that we produce, use and dispose our plastics, and we have to make it circular. And we can do that by using sustainable feedstock, like coming from renewable resources, or from circular feedstock, like recycling plastic waste.
So it's the right thing to do. Technologically, it's possible to do, but a big part of this equation that I'm still thinking about is it voluntary or is there a legal framework? Are countries, governments requiring companies now to pursue circular solutions?
So it's a bit both, right? I mean, we also want to keep using these plastics and the good properties of plastic. So in order to do that, we also need to make it sustainable. But you also see a regulatory push indeed. From Brussels, you see that there's requirement on single-use plastics or plastics that should not be ending up in the environment. So it's a bit twofold. And you also see that brand owners and consumers demand to have recycled content or products that are sustainable, or that they can still use the plastics when they are more sustainable. Yeah.
Can you give some examples, though, of these sustainable plastics that we're talking about here, so our audience can imagine what are they? Can you tell us more about the ones that exist already today?
Yeah. So some examples that you probably know is, for example, Lego. They introduced renewable plastics or plastics from renewable sources in their portfolio. What they did is the green parts, like the trees and the leaves, they are already made of bio-based plastics. Another example of recycled plastics is, for example, our PET bottle. In a lot of cases, there is recycled content. So, for example, if you would go into the shelves and look for a cola or Coke bottle, and that's already pretty dark. But also, if you look carefully, you see that the bottle is a little bit more grayish. That shows that there's recycled content. And an example that Borealis is bringing to the market is, for example, flexible packaging that is recycled back into these gray garbage bags. They are always made out of recycled plastic, so you also have that at home, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, so how does it work though? What's the story behind them? What makes them sustainable plastics?
Yeah, so going back to that, rethinking that value chain. So if you would start with produce, use, and dispose. If you would start with the dispose part, we need to make sure that we collect and recycle that plastic waste. It's just too valuable to waste that polymer and the properties. And you can perfectly recycle it, just like glass, paper, or metal that have proven it last decades. And plastic is also perfectly recyclable in doing that. If you would then look at this produce side, we can use that plastic waste as a feedstock to make new plastics. Mechanically, but also something that's called chemically recycling, bring it back to an oil that you can feed into our factories to replace the fossil feedstock. And another way is by using renewable feedstock. So that is coming from plants, vegetable oils that also replace that fossil feedstock. And there's directly another angle of making it sustainable by using fossil feedstock. Or fossil feedstock is basically the reason why we have climate change, right? CO2 emitted from the combustion of fossil resources, but also the use in plastics. So if we can limit that, you also address the climate change topic with that.
You're talking about limiting there, but what about cutting out fossil fuels completely? Is that a realistic goal?
Well, on the long run, that should be part of the circular economy. So if you have 100% circular economy, it is completely decoupled from fossil, and that would then be built up out of all these alternative feedstocks, renewable, circular, whatever. Yeah.
And how far are we today versus the goal?
Yeah, actually, we just started introducing these feedstocks. So 2 years ago, we started with. At Borealis, introducing the polymer portfolio based on renewable resources, but we see that growing, month by month, a really higher demand, but it's still tiny. But if you look, for example, on the strategy that OMV and Borealis just presented, they have the ambition to put 1.8 million ton of chemicals and sustainable chemicals and plastics in the market by 2030. So that's serious, and that's really where we are heading to. Yeah.
So Stephan, we're hearing about progress, and I'm getting the feeling that there's momentum building in this space. So tell us where we are on the cutting edge of the current technologies and how they're really, really contributing to the circular economy.
Yeah. So coming back to those recycling, so mechanical recycling already exists for some time, but what we now try to do is increase the quality of that by adding new technologies to basically have higher quality of recyclate for more applications and more high performance applications. But also this chemical recycling, maybe to share a bit on that is really new. And there what we do is basically the low quality plastic waste or the rejects from that mechanical recycling. We collect that and bring that back under. We heat it and bring it back to this oil, and that's then fed into the factory as an alternative to fossil. That's really a new technology that is being scaled up, and in that way we also make sure that we have that low quality that would nowadays go to incinerations, also utilized as a feedstock, as well being able to have virgin quality of plastic. Of recycled plastic for high value applications. And with renewables, what we do there is basically we use a vegetable oil. In our case, it's waste and residue streams from vegetable oil production, or a stream like used cooking oil, which is collected from food industry and restaurants, and then just purified and then refined into also an alternative feedstock to replace fossil feedstock.
So Stephan, you've mentioned that there are several streams for renewable feedstocks. What are the advantages and what are the disadvantages?
Yeah, so the advantage of using renewable feedstock is that you also have a reduced carbon footprint. We well know from school, plants absorb CO2 with photosynthesis, release the oxygen and store the carbon. And exactly that carbon that is stored is our carbon source that we use for producing chemicals and plastics. And that is also resulting then in a reduced carbon footprint of these sustainable plastics as compared to the fossil-based plastics. There's not really a disadvantage in that sense, other than that, for example, there's a concern that we are using food crops for producing chemicals and plastic, and that's something that we want to avoid. So what we use is really these waste and residue streams, which are not suitable anymore for food consumption, not by us, but also not by animals. And this is called second generation feedstock. There's also something which is, the food is sort of the first generation feedstock. Also used, for example, sugars are used by other players in our industry to produce chemicals or plastics. Also fine. I mean, at least in Europe, there are a lot of farmers, sugar farmers, that cannot get rid of their sugar anymore because we are not consuming it anymore. But that is, also then has this concern of competing with the food chain. So that's why we don't use that.
So that is being avoided because there's been a lot of criticism around the topic of using sugarcane as a renewable food stock, but it's not actually harvesting sugarcane to use it as a renewable. It's the byproduct of that crop.
Yeah. So in the case of second generation feedstock, it's really the waste coming out of that food production. So in case of sugarcane, you can also use the stems and leaves to produce other type of sugars as a feedstock. Yeah.
Okay, so these alternatives they're actually creating new efficiencies and not creating competition.
Indeed.
With food crops.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a win-win, right?
Indeed, and that's also exactly where the circular economy is about, right? Using these waste streams to feed in new economies. Yeah.
Okay, but let's get back to the bad guy now. You mentioned it earlier on. As things stand today, most plastics are produced from crude oil, and that gives it a bad image. And the majority of plastic waste still gets sent to incineration for energy recovery or put into landfills. How much can actually be recycled, though, and reused? What's the potential there?
So that majority of plastic waste that's now going into incineration, that needs to go into recycling. So first into mechanical recycling and afterwards into chemical recycling. Mechanical recycling technologies are nowadays updated, or we are developing them to obtain higher quality of recyclates out of it, so that you can also recycle more and to higher applications and more often afterwards. So we have more recycling. Chemical recycling forms a nice addition to that, where it uses the rejects from mechanical recycling, but also these low quality mixed plastic waste that is nowadays also incinerated, to form that back into this oil and feedstock. But also to make these virgin grade or these very pure plastics that is needed for example, food packaging.
If we take away, though, the incinerated plastics from the energy sources, is that a bad thing?
Yeah, so then you have impact on indeed the energy. The energy producers and industry. So indeed, that is a balance that we need to manage as well in the circular economy. So that is also is really a system change, right? So energy needs to come from renewable energies, geothermal or solar, or wind, whatever, but not from burning waste or plastic anymore.
So Stephan, how much plastic is actually produced from crude oil versus how much is produced from sustainable materials? What's the ratio? Are we talking 95 to 5, 90 to 10, 50-50? I mean, what's a reasonable ratio?
Yeah, I know. So we just started with this with introducing these type of solutions. So it's really low still. But like I mentioned, the ambition of Borealis and OMV is to really bring this 1.8 million ton of sustainable plastics into the market by 2030. So that is a serious scale up.
Which would be how much of the overall picture?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we are now doing something like 3.5 million ton of plastics. By then maybe a little bit more, but it's maybe almost half or 1/3 or half of it that we already have then transitioned. Yeah.
A little analysis on that, though. So are we talking about just a drop in the ocean in the relationship between sustainable and fossil? those numbers they seem enormous, but are they actually only really very tiny in the large scale of things?
Yeah, no. So we really have this ambition to transition to a complete circular economy, and the question is, okay, when will that happen? Is that in 10 years? Is that in 20 years? By 2050? I hope that it will be by 2050. It's only 28 years ago, so it's a big transition that we need to go through. But that's the challenge we need to we are taking now.
Yeah, there are some extremely strict requirements, for example, for food and medical uses. So, is renewable feedstock an alternative to reduce the share of virgin feedstock?
Yeah, so in case of mechanical recycling, it cannot perform to those standards yet. But chemical recycling and this renewable feedstock, they are really replacing the fossil feedstock in our production facilities. So they can indeed deliver to those high standards of food packaging or medical, like you mentioned. Yeah.
I mean, why does it have to be so clean? I mean, in medical, if you have this plastic material in contact with blood reserves, or in food packaging, it can't be contaminated by impure recycled plastics or something. So how good is the technology? Is it clean enough for medical and food packaging already?
Yeah, so the renewable or chemical recycled feedstock is. Mechanical not, because just to give you an idea of mechanical recycling, and then just related to food packaging. So you have food packaging, but it's also your shampoo bottle is made out of the same plastic. It's in the same mix, or maybe also the container of your motor oil. So all those type of packaging is in a mix of mechanical recycling. So that's why you cannot make a new food packaging out of that same material. But with chemical recycling, it is really the chemicals. It's really like broken down to base chemicals, which makes that all impurities are already out, and then mixed with virgin feedstock, and then also what we call virgin quality polymers can be produced without all those contaminants, and that can do food packaging or medical applications.
So with medical syringes, for instance, it could have started its life as a shampoo bottle?
Yeah, no, as long as it's indeed through that loop of chemical recycling, yeah. And also with renewable resources, I mean, it's vegetable oil. It's just an oil like fossil oil, but it's not coming from our earth, it's just coming from plants, right? So it's clean.
So where's the market headed in terms of what your customers are asking for? What are they asking you to produce?
Yeah, it's a mix. So recycling is really addressing this plastic waste issue. So you see that a lot of companies that have that on top of their agenda really want to have recycled content in their products. Renewable feedstock is more about climate change, about reduced carbon footprint. So if you have solutions, more doable solutions and applications, then they choose for a reduced carbon footprint of their plastic. And what you see now is that so those two things are requested differently in different markets. And you see that, it's now really introduced. You can find it in the shelves, and they put it on their packaging like this has recycled content, or this has a reduced carbon footprint because of the plastics is made of such and such. That's why you can already see it happening. Yeah.
That's what I wanted to ask. Like, is there a standardized system of identification? Like, can I go into a supermarket, look at a product, and go, "Oh, there's that code that says this is made from sustainable plastic," or is that still all to come?
Yeah, so actually there's a lot of logos and claims and things that you can recognize, but they are quite scattered. For recycled it's different, and then you have renewable, and then you have FSC or paper and all those things. And in a lot of cases they're also regional. So in the Nordic countries they have totally different ones than in Germany or the Netherlands or in Austria. So that can be confusing for customers, and what you now see is that well, at least the brand owners put messaging on their packaging. So I think there the consumer can already choose or make that conscious choice. Okay, I want to have this one instead of the other. What you also see is in Brussels, they try to, in the European Commission, they try to now standardize that to see, okay, what kind of labels or standards can we accept for the different things that everybody understand, and that you don't have any confusion around that, because that's also what you want to avoid when you want to scale up these solutions.
So, Stephan, what it sounds like you're saying is that the green standard in environmentally friendly alternatives depends on who you're asking, because different customers have different requests, different needs.
Yeah, so basically you have also different type of plastic. So, for example, the PET bottle, which is transparent and rigid to make bottles, is really used to make bottles. What we as Borealis produce are polypropylene, polyethylene, and they are found, for example, in your shampoo bottle or flexible packaging. So it fits a different need. But the solutions that we discussed about using renewable feedstock or using recycled feedstock, they apply to all these plastics. So also PET can be produced from renewable feedstock or from recycled feedstock. And you also have plastics that which are used in your car, which are also totally different. So, indeed, different people have different plastics serve different type of applications.
Okay, so we're moving towards several better solutions for several big problems.
Yeah, solution which can be applied for all those different plastics. So you would not use PET that bottle to make a car. That's another type of plastic, right? So it's all different plastics for different applications, so to say.
Sounds great, but why not paper, cardboard, or carton packaging instead?
Yeah, no, I think they also have their application. I think paper works very well in certain applications, like boxes or carton boxes, but they don't work so well in, for example, food packaging or preserving your food with a longer shelf life. So I think every material has its benefits, but you really see that plastics offer, in many cases, superior benefits because of what I like, strength and lightweight, or the barrier properties, and that's why you also see it so often, because it does its job so good. But we only need to make sure that we rethink the way we use it and produce it and dispose it.
That's
and make
because
it circular.
we're not getting rid of it anytime soon.
No, so we just need to reuse it and use it circular. Yeah.
So, Stephan, as we move toward the end of this episode, let's look at the big picture, and I want to ask you how much sustainable plastics will be contributing to the circular economy, and how much will they be contributing to us reaching climate goals?
If you would picture an end state of 100% circular economy, we are completely decoupled from fossil feedstock. So that means that it needs to come from all these alternative options, and we need to have all these options on top of each other, like the CO2, like renewables, or like circular. And that is a big task, and maybe we find a fourth one in the mix in the coming years. But that's the end state. So it's not only a fraction; it is a complete replacement of fossil feedstock to produce plastics, and that will contribute to reducing plastic waste in our environment, because we are reusing it as a feedstock. But also in case of CO2 based or renewable based, will limit our the carbon footprint and carbon emissions into our atmosphere.
And if we look to, let's say, the foreseeable future, the next 5 to 10 years, how will sustainable plastics change the actual world that we live in, like the daily living that we exist on this planet?
And I mean, then we will still benefit from the good properties of plastic. So we will still see them all around you in the shop, as packaging, as in your house, in office, in your car. but they will be made out of sustainable feedstock. They will have a lower carbon footprint. They will have recycled content. So that's how we'll see them around us, but then being sustainable.
And we as consumers will know this because we will be told in advance when we buy these products that this, let's say, car, all of the plastics in this car and the dashboard or whatever, they all come from sustainable plastics.
From a previous car, yeah, indeed, yeah.
So Stephan, from Lego to all of these fascinating and wonderful possibilities that are on our horizon, thank you for giving us so much insight into sustainable plastics and this fascinating aspect of the circular economy.
Thank you so much, Stephan. We hope that you all enjoyed listening to the episode as well. And again, if you listen to the podcast and want to watch the conversation with Stephan, head over to OMV's YouTube channel. Or if you have feedback or questions, indeed, please write us an email to podcast@omv.com. We would love to hear from you. And for more background information on sustainable plastics, check out our show notes where you'll find links to lots of valuable information.
That will do it for us this time around. We hope you will be joining us again for the next episode of Rethinking Resources.